Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us for the fourth and final conversation in a series led by the Dunwoody Perimeter Chamber called Return to the Perimeter. I'm Jennifer Betcher, the Communications Director for the City of Dunwoody, and I will be your moderator this morning. I want to begin by thanking our series sponsors, Cox Enterprises and the City of Dunwoody, for leading the way and opening up this important discussion. A quick note about the format. If you're watching on Facebook Live, we would love for you to be part of the discussion by posting your comments or questions. We will get to as many of them as we can during this hour. Now to our special guest this morning, Dunwoody Mayor Lynn Deutsch, who took office in January after serving as a member of City Council for 8 years and Mayor Pro Tem for 2 years. Mayor, we are going to dive into the reopening issues and health concerns in a moment, and that will be our focus today. But let's begin with another matter that is in the news here and across the nation. Can you share your thoughts on policing and diversity in the community?
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to the Chamber for having us, and to anyone tuning in. We appreciate you being here. In Dunwoody, I have always said that diversity is certainly one of our strengths. We passed last year, we were one of a handful of cities in the state of Georgia that has passed a non-discrimination ordinance. Ours differed from some other cities because we actually required hate crimes training for our police officers and tracking by our Department of Hate Crimes. We have lobbied at the behest of our police chief for many years for the passage of a hate crimes bill. And I am pleased to see that this year, just in the last few days, the state legislature passed a hate crimes bill, and it is now on the governor's desk to sign. And so that is certainly moving the state in the right direction. We, knowing though that there's always more that we can do, I have begun a discussion with a group of Dunwoody residents about how to move forward to have conversations about these really hard issues. And like everything else today, COVID certainly makes things complicated. How you have conversations and certainly in-person meetings has radically changed. And so we're working towards some forums and other opportunities to have community discussions. I want, and council wants, and our city wants a place where everyone feels included, and we are to be a inclusive community. And so working together, we can make this our community a better place for everyone. Recently, our police chief did a presentation about use of force policies and other procedures in our police department to city council. It was public, it's recorded. And as sometime this year, he has committed to having a town hall. His preference and mine is to be able to do that in person. So we are just waiting to see if the public health situation will allow for that in the future. If not, we will come up with a way to engage the community in that discussion. On a personal level, when I ran for mayor, I discussed needing to make our volunteer community boards and commissions more reflective of our community at large. And so I have actually begun working on that because our city is very diverse, but sometimes our leadership doesn't reflect that.
Now let's move to the reopening, the phased reopening of Dunwoody City Hall and City Parks. It began about 6 weeks ago. How's it going so far?
Well, let's step back to the very beginning in the middle of March, around March 12th, when this all begun. And I'm really proud of how prepared our city staff was. They saw that something might need to change for how people worked, city employees. And so they prepared for people to be able to work at home with the proper security as it relates to technology. And that everyone had the needed technology. And so when we shut down around March 13th, the work of the city continued uninterrupted. And I'm very proud of that. And the work continues, and City Hall reopened like you said several weeks ago, and I began working at City Hall a few weeks before it officially reopened, as my youngest daughter finished college classes, and my office, the kitchen, became less practical. So I moved back to my office at City Hall, but it's still very quiet. People come in if they need to. There certainly have been some key staff members that have been here on a regular basis. But for the most part, work continues, and but very few people are here regularly, and working from home is working great. Our court just reopened. It seems to be running smoothly. We've extended our sessions. Court is in session much more than it used to be. There are far fewer people at any session, and people are lining up 6 feet apart and doing what they need to do to respect each other's space. We never actually closed our parks or trails. It was very important to me that our residents had a place to go where they could safely exercise. As I have said repeatedly, if you happen to follow me on Facebook or in some of the communications from the city, that mental health is just as big of a concern as physical health. And so keeping our trails and green space open were key to allowing people to exercise. And overwhelmingly, our citizens and visitors respected the rules, social distancing. They didn't open the playground when it was closed, even though all that we had closing it was a piece of tape. And I'm really pleased to see how seriously people were taking the safety precautions necessary, but that also, unlike some of our neighboring cities that closed the green space part of their parks and their trails, we were able to keep them open. And since then, we have now opened all our amenities: the dog park, basketball courts, playgrounds, and our tennis courts, the bathrooms, water fountains. Everything that is in our parks is open, and I hope we can continue to keep it open. People seem to be respecting each other's space, and it's really an important thing that, especially for children, I worry about children being cooped up all day and not having camps. And we worked with our neighboring cities. I know some residents were eager for me to open different things, but it was important that we all act together. So I think it's going well.
No city can handle this in a vacuum. So how important is it for you to stay in touch with mayors of neighboring cities and other leaders on the county, state, and federal levels?
So at one point during this COVID-19 public health crisis, Dunwoody has 5 cities that touch our borders. And at one point, all 6 of us had different rules. It was terribly impractical and very frustrating. And so it meant that in Dunwoody, you could walk on the trail, and in Peachtree Corners, you could eat in a restaurant. It was very confusing to people. And so I was in a lot of communication with our neighboring mayors. We were having regular DeKalb Municipal Association calls, working with the CEO, working with our state reps and state senators, using our governmental affairs people to get to the governor's office. I think sometimes people don't realize that while Dunwoody's population is about 45,000, on any given pre-COVID day, we're about 100,000 people. We have tens of thousands of people from across Metro Atlanta that come into Dunwoody to work. And so, and our businesses, while many are locally owned, they are, many are owned by people in other places. And so the rules in their city or county were different from ours. So it caused a lot of confusion. And so one of the lessons learned, and I'm keeping a list, is that we have to have a regional approach in a crisis. And so I'm hoping that no mayor ever has to go through this again. And but if they do, I expect we have learned some important and valuable lessons.
How closely do you monitor the case numbers for Dunwoody zip codes and communicate with health officials?
So somewhere towards the beginning of this, the Georgia Municipal Association set up a weekly call with other mayors, and we have Dr. Toomey, who is the Georgia Department of Public Health Commissioner, and Mr. Bryson, who runs the Georgia Emergency Management Agency. And the two of them are key players in this at the state level. And I have learned a tremendous amount about COVID, and understanding how it spreads and understanding what needs to happen to slow the spread, and learned about PPE supply challenges and what the state is doing. Additionally, the White House set up calls for mayors that are weekly until recently. Now they're biweekly. But and on those calls, we've heard from everybody from the vice president to Dr. Birx, who is the on the president's advisory committee, and learning about testing and contact tracing. And for businesses, and that's a big part of Dunwoody, contact tracing is going to be key in reopening. And so contact tracing is when someone is exposed, in this case to COVID-19, the health department will reach out to the people that had more than 15 minutes of contact with that person in the last 2 days. The information has to be supplied by the person that was diagnosed, and then the health department reaches out to those people and gives them instructions and asks them to monitor their symptoms and get tested, even if they don't develop symptoms. But it's really important, because for office is to open successfully and for the Georgia economy to fully reopen and to keep Georgians safe, we need everyone to work towards slowing the spread. And so contact tracing is an important part of that. And the state and the White House expects mayors to communicate with their residents, because we're the closest form of government to our people. And so towards the end of April, DeKalb County started giving us data based on zip code, but all it is a number of cases, and with some growth shown the next time they give us cases. But until, and I hesitate to say this because I'm afraid I might be cursing it, until about a week ago, there were significant delays in the returning of test results for many individuals in Georgia. So it wasn't uncommon for people to wait 10 days or 2 weeks to get their test results. And that's a real problem, because for some people, knowing that they're positive or negative impacts their behavior. And so while they were waiting, if they weren't isolated and then they turned out to be positive, they obviously had perhaps spread the virus. And so in the last week or so, at least anecdotally, I'm hearing from people that their tests are coming back much more quickly. And that's good news. And if you think you have been exposed, Dr. Toomey still recommends that you get the regular test, the one where they test you through your nose, as opposed to the rapid test. The rapid test is still having accuracy issues. And so you get your test. So for me, back to the data, sorry, I get a little distracted. DeKalb's data is just zip code data. So what I know about the situation in Dunwoody specifically is that our cases continue to increase. A week ago, a little more than a week ago, another testing location was opened in Doraville. We have one in Dunwoody, with a big effort to encourage people in the Doraville and Dunwoody area to get tested. And so we certainly are seeing an increase in tests. These are likely active cases because the test responses are getting reported so much faster. And the virus is still out there, and people still need to be careful. And I'm hoping that because the virus isn't going away, the need for good data isn't going away either. And I'm hoping that DeKalb Public Health can increase their capacity to provide data in a little bit more useful form.
Let's talk about the business community now. What is the city's role in supporting the reopening process?
So the business community has been at the forefront of my mind since this crisis began. And during shelter in place, which was really hard for everyone and extremely stressful and difficult for our businesses, We started some initiatives within the city. For example, we developed a passport that we encouraged Dunwoody residents to fill out where they visited, a Mexican restaurant or a steakhouse. And we had a lot of participation in that. As a community, I believe we rallied so much for our local restaurants. And I have been having conversations with our restaurateurs slowly over the last few weeks. And while no one's business is anywhere near normal, they are all so grateful for the support that our community has given them, and I hope they are continuing to give them. We just started a Shop, Eat, Support Local campaign. You can see some of the signage around Dunwoody. And then weeks ago, as the governor reopened the state, we passed an ordinance, the city council passed an ordinance to allow restaurants to expand their outdoor seating. So lots of people may not be ready to eat inside a restaurant, but they are more than okay with eating outside. But many restaurants just had a small porch. In this way, they've been allowed to expand it. And I've seen examples of it throughout Dunwoody, and I'm so pleased. And to make it easier for restaurants, the city of Dunwoody, with the assistance of Home Depot, who donated 24 picnic tables and supplies to paint them, is distributing picnic tables throughout the city if the restaurants ask for them. And so far, they're at a couple of restaurants, Vino Venue and Crema, come to mind, and one has been painted. They're going to be painted by local artists and students, and so it'll allow the restaurants to actually expand their seating without any expense. The city is absorbing the expense. Additionally, in some parts of town, we'll make a series of picnic tables available so that you can pick up food at any of the restaurants and eat almost like a mini food court. So, but I really encourage our residents to keep up the good work. Jennifer, we have residents of Dunwoody who own restaurants in other communities, and they say they haven't seen anything like what we've done in Dunwoody anywhere else. And so that makes me very proud.
That's great. And the picnic tables are so cute. So we're excited about
cute.
Well, for some, the reopening is happening too quickly. For some, it's happening too slowly. I know you get a lot of emails about this. What is your message as mayor?
So I think because I never paused the way a lot of citizens did, my work never really stopped. I was acutely aware pretty quickly that we were going to reopen with the virus present, that we were sheltering in place to keep people in our part of Georgia, the state, the country from dying in a hospital because the surge of cases was too great to be accommodated, and that there wouldn't be enough ventilators and there wouldn't be enough hospital beds as we saw in other countries. And so, but we were never sheltering in place to make the virus go away. That wasn't the initial goal. And so I was a little surprised about the timing. It was a little earlier than I thought it would be, actually a week earlier, so maybe not that significantly. And what I asked people to do as we reopened is to give our businesses the space and the grace to figure out how things would work for them, the businesses and their employees. I have said many times during this crisis that none of us know what someone else is going through. We don't know their situation at home. We don't know what health challenges they may have. And I have, after the initial shock of the reopening, and I think there was a lot of reaction to that, I believe our community has, for the most part, done that very well, and I'm very proud of them. You know, we are never, ever going to agree on any one item. You're never going to get 100% of people to agree, but respecting what, respecting and having conversations is the way through that, not challenging and arguing on social media. That doesn't help anybody. So now we've reopened, right? And it's not going perfectly. The numbers are increasing in Georgia. I monitor the hospitalization numbers. They had decreased pretty significantly, and they are starting to tick up. But the virus isn't going away. And so we have to open the economy. There is no choice. And so, but we have to do it carefully and we have to do it safely. Talked about contact tracing. I think that's really important. Yesterday, Jennifer and Kathy Florence, who also works in our communication department, designed a logo that we have started sharing on social media about Mask Up Dunwoody. I need you to wear your mask. I understand probably more than anybody how confusing the information about COVID has been. And that, and Dr. Toomey likes to remind me and all the other mayors that this is a novel virus, and novel means new. And so while the virus itself is still here and is still the same virus that it was in the middle of March, we have learned so much more. And additionally, some of the initial personal protective equipment supply issues that we clearly had as a country, and also should be a long-term lesson, at the beginning of this aren't as problematic anymore. And so the advice on masking has changed. In the beginning, we were advised that they weren't necessary. We now know that they can help slow the spread. They're not perfect. No tool is perfect. You still need to social distance. But if you sneeze and you don't have a mask on and you're in public, your germs go everywhere. At least with a mask, there's some hope that some of it will not spread. Additionally, social distancing is our number one tool to keep everyone safe. So don't get on top of people. It's I know it's really hard, but just don't get on top of people. This virus is contagious. There was a group of construction workers in College Station, Texas, which happens to be where my daughter goes to school, and 90% of them have now tested positive. And so it's just important to remember that it's still out there. And wear your mask.
When shelter in place started, a lot of people began walking more and biking more. What is the city doing to encourage that and keep it going?
Okay, so first of all, it's just awesome. And it's just awesome. And I noticed the other day when I coming home at dinner time a few weeks ago from City Hall, the number of families just walking down Chamblee Dunwoody. And so it hasn't stopped, even though it's gotten a little warmer and sometimes uncomfortably warmer, and it just makes me so excited. So we clarified our ordinance on bikes on sidewalks. The language was unclear. It was contradictory. So we are adopting new rules for bikes on sidewalks, but you will be allowed to ride your bike on sidewalks. We have the only vulnerable road user ordinance in the state. I dare anyone to say that fast 3 times. So I'm going to call it VRU from here on out. And we're 2 months in. We actually issued our first tickets related to VRU in a crosswalk activity that our police did a few weeks ago, where they were seeing if people stopped for people in the stop walks, and they did not. And so they got a ticket under the VRU. We are building sidewalks. Tilly Mills and Peeler were recently approved. Tilly Mills was approved a long time ago, but I'm hoping it's starting soon. We also gave our Public Works Department the green light to go ahead and start talking about a neighborhood sidewalk policy. When we became a city, we didn't have very many sidewalks, and our priority was, as it should have been, safe routes to schools to put sidewalks in, and our main thoroughfares. And we're not finished with those. We're getting close to the school one, finishing the school one, but the main thoroughfares we're still working on. But as we leave that stage, how do we address neighborhoods' demand for sidewalks? And so, because there's miles and miles and miles of roads in Dunwoody, or neighborhoods, streets and neighborhoods that people might want sidewalks on, and how are we going to fund it? How are we going to prioritize it? We have some new crosswalks, including an exciting one at Hammond, which when perimeter starts to open up, when people start coming back to the office buildings, I think will be used highly for people to get to the mall and to Nukes and to the Old Navy, the back and forth. And so I think it's really exciting. We're also looking at improving our crosswalk technology. That's part of the discussion the council will undergo this fall during our budget process.
So this ties in well with plans in the perimeter area to add a park and improve connectivity in that region. Where do those plans stand?
Well, we have about 8,000 people that live in the perimeter, and we don't have a park in the perimeter. And so it is council's number one priority for parks to build a park perimeter in the perimeter area down by where Old City Hall used to be. We have the land, the design and engineering are underway. This park will connect to the bridge over Nancy Creek in the Georgetown area and will allow connectivity up to Ashford Dunwoody. It will have a playground and a pavilion, and it's very exciting. And it is our top priority in terms of parks because we need a playground in the perimeter area and a park to serve the residents who live here. The Ashford Dunwoody Commuter Trail is something that a lot of people are really excited about. And we have been working on the design for phase 1 and phase 2. And it's going to be terrific. It's going to be wide. It's going to allow people to ride their bikes and walk up and down Ashford Dunwoody. We're working with the mall to improve pedestrian access from the trail, from Ashford Dunwoody Road and from the trail into the mall. And I think it will really enhance people's experiences. When I was campaigning, one of the things I said is that as a city, if the people who work in all the high rises in the perimeter area or in the low rises for that matter, if they feel like they have to get in their car to go to lunch, we have failed. But right now, it's not a very attractive or safe feeling place to walk. And that's what we understand about people who commute with their feet is that they need to have somewhere to walk to. And we have great restaurants and amenities already in perimeter. It has to be pleasant. It has to be a pleasant walk, and it has to be safe. And so we've got 1, and we're working on 2 and 3. Part of the way we reduce traffic is by making people comfortable helping people feel comfortable to use other forms of transportation. And in this case, walking and cycling could make a big difference in the perimeter area.
Connectivity was a big focus of the council retreat back in March, but you were talking about more than just trails when you used that phrase, right?
Yes. So we had the best retreat we've had in years. The Discover Dunwoody, which is our Convention and Visitors Bureau, brought in a speaker who wrote a book for the love of cities, and the theme of his presentation was fun. And so we all attended that and then went to our retreat. And it seems like a million years ago, but it was literally the week before we locked down. And in our discussions, we discussed how we were going to move Dunwoody forward. And we had lots of different ideas, dinner, lots of programming ideas. For me, we talk a lot about placemaking. It's become a buzzword in cities. What is the place that defines your city? And we're working on that. Public art is a big placemaking strategy, but I also believe that programming can be placemaking. Certainly our events, many of which can't happen right now, bring people together. And so we brainstormed different ways to how we were going to bring people together, which we will get back to those. I am confident that we will gather again in public. But we also talked about things related to internet connectivity and how we improve that for our businesses and our residents alike. What is it that we need to do as a city to offer the best and fastest connectivity in terms of internet? And then programming, which I've mentioned already, and figuring out how we can connect our Dunwoody is a city of neighborhoods, and how we do things to connect our neighborhoods. And connectivity is certainly, that's going to be sidewalks, but it also might be a series of neighborhoods getting together for an event. I live in the North Springs area, and one of my residents who was at that event that the Discover Dunwoody put on suggested we have brunch on the bridge over the new Georgetown Bridge. And so how we build networks and connectivities through our neighborhoods is a way we strengthen our community as a whole. And of course, so as we finished the day, the retreat, it was clear that connectivity, if you ask us to describe what we had talked about in one word, it was connectivity. And I'm excited to get back to that.
Soon, we hope.
Right, soon, right.
So even with COVID, when things slowed down, construction continued, and there was a lot of it in the perimeter area. Can you kind of update us on projects that are wrapping up or those that are underway?
So I always presume that people don't know where everything is. So by the Dunwoody MARTA station in the mall, what looks to be in the mall parking lot, an office building is opening, and it's Insight Global. And Insight Global was a company that was founded in Dunwoody. Their first office was in the Georgetown area in an office building that has been torn down and is the townhomes behind Waffle House now. But they were for a while they were in Brookhaven, but they have returned to Dunwoody and are opening a high rise this summer. It's complete. I do not know if they've moved in yet. And then next to that, connected to the Insight Global building, is a hotel called Hyatt Place, and they will open early this fall, I believe. And so those projects are essentially complete. Then the AC Hotel, which is by SunTrust Bank in the perimeter area, it's in that parking lot. They have started. They're out of the ground. Their construction is out of the ground. I don't know their timeline. Branch Properties, which is putting a grocery store and some other amenities where the 3 restaurants used to sit near Meadows Lane on Ashford Dunwoody, they have been under construction, and the construction continues there. And Branch Properties is actually going to install a large part of the perimeter trail, the commuter trail, in front of their project, as well as take what is now a driveway and turn it into a public road. So you'll be able to turn right if you're coming down Ashford Dunwoody before you get to the project, and cut through to Meadows Lane. And so that will hopefully ease some of the congestion that we normally experience on Ashford Dunwoody Road. Additionally, outside of the perimeter, there has been some city construction at Brook Run Park. The projects are now completed. We are not going to have the traditional celebration that we would have, but we have completed the amphitheater. It is beautiful. It is especially attractive in the evenings, like at dusk, just from personal visits. And we have installed 2 turf multipurpose fields, a new parking lot, bathrooms, a pavilion, and people are using the fields. I've seen organized or semi-organized groups out there using it, and it's a great amenity. And the fields are large enough that the spectators can spread out. I'm always thinking about social distancing, and we look forward to eventually using the amphitheater. That one's a little trickier, but the amenities are great. Brook Run looks really good, and we really, it's just hard. There's nothing about this has been easy, but knowing that at least the fields are finished, and it's another opportunity for people to exercise and get out there and kick a ball or throw a ball using hand sanitizer. But it's just good. It's just good. And one other thing about Brook Run, if you don't mind. The other thing is that I'm that mayor that sometimes just goes to see what's happening. And so I drive around, and the amphitheater being complete has also given people other nooks to find. And one of the things that's impressed me, and I know I've talked about it with our parks director, Brent Walker, is the way people have found to use our public space, our green space, to be with their families outside, but keep their distance. And so that is what I'm very proud of our community.
Yeah, we did takeout at the pavilion one day. We brought our food there to eat. So
That's just
for that too.
So smart. and I've seen so many versions of that where people have a picnic blanket thrown on the ground and in places where there's grass, but that pre-COVID I had never seen anyone use. And so people are taking it seriously, but also using all our parks in such a great way.
So in this changing economic environment, what can the city do to deal with potential changes in the marketplace, specifically in the perimeter area?
So, we're still so much in the thick of this public health crisis. It's hard to see what's totally going to be on the other side, but we are in the middle of our required comprehensive land use plan update. The state requires that you update it every few years. And so it's just a great time for us to look at developing a comprehensive economic development plan, and have a conversation with the community about where we go in that direction. So I don't have a lot of answers. I have a lot of uncertainty, but and I am I've had one or two conversations with members of the business community, as well as the individual conversations I'm having with business owners and managers in the Dunwoody area. But there's going to have to be a lot more of that as we move forward. And additionally, as a city, because we're part of a region, things are a little more challenging. But I do believe that, and from my calls, like one time on the White House call, one of the president's economic advisors said that government has to help people feel safe to fully reopen the economy. And so I continue to work with our other mayors in the region so that we can help our businesses feel like it's safe to bring people back in, and whatever we can do to support, we're here for them.
Let's switch gears for a moment and talk about a topic that you and I talk about a lot offline. That is the 2020 census. The participation rate in Dunwoody is about 64% right now. Why is it so important to get those numbers up?
Okay, so because your mayor is really competitive. And poor Jennifer, because they publish the numbers, the percentages I think they give them to Jennifer as our census director, for lack of a better word, for Dunwoody, or coordinator, but she probably gets them fairly often. Every now and then somebody at the state decides to send them to the mayors. And so we're a lot better than some of our neighboring cities, which is great. But Tucker is consistently 1 point ahead of us, and we just cannot have that.
It's just 1 point.
but it's been 1 point every time I look. So the challenging thing, that the wrench that COVID has thrown into this is that Dunwoody was a city that it should have been easy to do really well with this, because in the previous census, they show you where your low response rates are. And Jennifer and Kathy and staff had developed some really concrete strategies. We were going to have a carnival. The school system was going to be our partner. And then March 12th happened, and all that had to stop. And so the census is so important because it relates to money that comes into us. It comes into the county, and it comes into the state. It's also, we're 45,000 people, which is a big city in Georgia, but lots of federal programs, you have to be bigger. 50,000 seems to be the key. And so how we're going to be counted and to get the money is part of it, but also access to programs and resources. And many of you probably know that we have a school overcrowding problem in Dunwoody. And these are the numbers that help us help the school system build the appropriate amount of school capacity for the future. And so we really need, if you haven't, and it's safe and it's anonymous and it's perfectly fine. And it's easy, it's online, or you can call, or you can mail it in. And so if you haven't completed the process, in August, the census says they're sending people out door to door. And so we want to avoid that both for you and for the census workers. And so let's get those forms in. Last week, one of the National Mayors Associations that I'm involved with sponsored a session on how to do the census during COVID. And there were some ideas. We may do some mailing. In August, you're going to get a robocall from DeKalb County that will be me. And I know you have already completed it. Many of you have already completed it. And I'm really, but lots of people haven't. What did you say? 36%.
Right.
And so, so I want everyone to understand that we're using all the tools we have in the toolbox, even if it wouldn't be something we would have normally done, because we're very limited as to what we can do. If this was not COVID times, I might be standing in those communities asking people to do it myself, but that's not appropriate at the moment. So
not at the moment, but maybe in September.
maybe in September, and I'll be there, especially if Tucker's still ahead of us.
That's right. 1 point. All right. So let's go to Facebook now. And we'd like to take some questions for the mayor from there. They should pop up on our screen momentarily. So we'll look for that. And here is from Andrew Ziffer. Is Dunwoody, DeKalb, hi, Andrew. Is Dunwoody, DeKalb, or Georgia working on a COVID contact tracing phone app?
So thank you for that question. So Georgia's contact tracing does not trace people's movements electronically or via an app. What they will ask people who have been exposed to do is to monitor their symptoms. And part of that is so that the public health department can let you know, oh my, you've had this symptom for 2 days, you should go get tested now, as opposed to waiting for the 10 days that 5 to 10 days that they might encourage you to wait if you don't develop symptoms. But they are not in Georgia. There is, as far as I know, from the meetings I've attended, no plan to track people's movements. And that's what makes people uncomfortable, is they worry that their movements are being tracked. And so that is really, thank you, Andrew, for that really difficult question. But yes, no. So people I've had comments from people that have told me they're not going to participate in contact tracing because they don't want the government tracing their movements. And this is not that. This is all about just helping the people that have been exposed understand that they may be sick and they need to take care and get tested.
Thank you, Andrew, for that question. We have another one coming to us on Facebook from Ana Maria Martinez. What is being done to educate our Spanish-speaking Dunwoody residents as to both COVID and the census? What a very timely question.
Timely question. So as we speak, Jennifer and Kathy are developing signage for our Hispanic community on how to get tested. And until recently, the health department and the health department, I believe, the health department is also taking some steps. And our for the most part, many of our Hispanic residents interact with residents of Doraville as well. And so I've been working with Joseph Gierman, who's the mayor of Doraville, to come up with a campaign. We pushed really hard together to get the Doraville to have a testing site. Dunwoody's had one for many months now, I think, at this point. It's located at Kingswood. It's open on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday should anyone need a test. The Doraville testing site just opened at the old Kmart site on Buford Highway about a week and a half ago. It's open Monday through Friday. We are working together, Joseph and I. We are putting up signs. Yesterday, I started visiting the businesses that serve our Spanish-speaking residents in the Winters Chapel and Peachtree Industrial Area, Peeler, to ask permission for us to put a sign in their businesses so that we can let people know. We're going to do some signs that go in the ground, but we're also going to do some flyers for the restaurant, the businesses' windows. And I've had a positive reception from the managers of those establishments. One of the lessons learned for me personally, and I actually look forward to delving into this as the crisis eases, is how you reach the communities that are the hardest to reach in general and also in a crisis. And so learning as I go is a lot of what's happened the last few months. But additionally for the census, signs have been placed in Spanish. Corners Outreach is a partner of ours. They are involved in Kingsley and Hightower Elementary School. And Hightower, while it's in Doraville, educates a fair number of Dunwoody children. And so we had a big plan with Corners. I think we're easing back into some of it. Jennifer, you can probably speak to that a little more. But again, the ability to do some of the face-to-face things. Additionally, just because it came up, Corners Outreach, who I've explained is one of our partners, they have members of the communities they support. They have trained to make masks. And if you go to their website, it's Corners Outreach. You will see that they have a store and they have masks. And if you're like me, you can start treating them as a fashion accessory to purchase that will support those families, because this stuff is really hard right now.
And Anna Maria, if you have any ideas, please let us know.
Send them our way.
Yeah, send them our way. That would be great. Thank you so much. Mayor, I want to ask you, what is the hardest decision you've had to make as mayor so far in your first 6 months? Putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, no, I think the hardest decision was way back around March 16th or 17th, which was to just start taking action. Mm-hmm. We were the second city in Georgia to take any action. As a reminder, I said it earlier, I'm responsible for the 45,000 residents of Dunwoody who live here all the time, but also the 60,000 residents of the greater metro Atlanta area who commute in. And the decision to just do something as we saw the virus building was probably, it was the beginning of a really rough few weeks of tough decisions. There was, I don't think, there was certainly no decision we've made as a council, and I am extremely grateful for my city council, or your city council, our city council, because they have been extremely supportive. You all may not be aware because of some structural limitations in our charter, because no one ever envisioned a pandemic. We met sometimes two or three council meetings a day in March to get through the emergency task we needed to do. And council was there and ready and able to do the work necessarily and to be supportive. And so the first few weeks of this were really difficult. The next difficult day was when the governor announced reopening, and there was so much confusion. And for a minute there, I wasn't sure we were going to stick together, but we rallied and have proceeded. Really, like I said, Jennifer, I couldn't be more proud of our community. They really have made my job relatively as easy as it could have been, and council's job as easy as it could have been during this time.
Well, before we wrap up, I'd like to ask if you have any final thoughts on the reopening and sort of where we go from here.
So I want to talk about something that I didn't get to mention, and it's one of the reasons I'm so proud of our community. The week before the official shutdown, a friend and I, we could feel it coming. We knew something was going to happen, and we knew there was going to be some disruption. And so my friend Erica and I started talking about the families in Dunwoody and the surrounding communities that are dependent on school lunches and school breakfasts as a large part of their family's nutrition. And we knew the disruption was going to be dramatic for those families. And so we threw together something we called Lunch for Our Bunch. We partnered with Malachi's Storehouse, which is housed at a church in Dunwoody at St. Patrick's, because they already had a distribution system in place in Dunwoody. And then we asked our community to help. And the response has been and continues to be overwhelming. Additionally, we shared that Community Assistance Center and Jewish Family and Career Services, there's a group that collects at Dunwoody Baptist, All Saints. There are lots of different places that have supported families in need, and the need has grown. You know, when we did this, we thought the kids would be out of school for a week or two. No idea that we would still be collecting on Tuesday afternoons. And our community has shown just how good they are. Malachi's was regularly serving about 150 families a week, and now consistently serves a little bit over 300. And the support of this community has made that possible. The Community Assistance Center, right before, Jennifer, I'm sure you remember, right before the pandemic shutdown started, had opened a location in Dunwoody, and they're serving lunches and providing resources to families now a couple of days a week. All these organizations, and I think it's important for the community to know that a lot of these organizations, the demand went way up at a time when they had to ask some of their volunteers not to come because they were in the most at-risk groups. Mm-hmm. But this community has rallied and has made me very proud. And so just because I think Dunwoody's goodness always should be celebrated, I wanted to throw that in. Also, I want to thank everyone who's watching for being here. And additionally, I've already mentioned how great my council has been. The city staff has been extraordinary. They've been a huge support to myself and council, but also the fact that business has, for the most part, continued uninterrupted. Permitting, building inspections, all that has continued uninterrupted, and that just really speaks well of our city and its preparedness for a disaster. And though we could never have imagined this particular crisis, they have done great. And, you know, we're not through this public health crisis, and everyone still needs to take care, wash your hands, wear your mask, continue to social distance, and stay home if you don't feel well. But we're going to get through it together, just like we're already getting it through it together, and continue to support our local businesses and reach out to me if you need anything. And thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor, so much for joining us this morning. And a special thank you to our series sponsors, Cox Enterprises and the City of Dunwoody. On behalf of the Dunwoody Perimeter Chamber, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Be safe and be well. And remember the mayor's words, space and grace.
Thank you, Jennifer, again.